evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, y'all.
Welcome to another episode, 110 episodes. Can you believe that we're 110, Gladys?
That's exciting. I mean, we've been growing. Did a recording earlier today for another podcast, and I love that the host was like bringing up, that was one of the first things he brought up was this podcast, and he reminded people at least 3 different times, make sure you listen in, check in. So that was kind of cool, where it's becoming a little bit more advertised, like word of mouth. So it's pretty fun. So thank you very much. We have a guest today. Thanks so much for being here. This is exciting to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be on the podcast with you guys. Really excited for today's activity. Looking forward to seeing how you guys do. And just, I'm excited for drinking on a Monday night, and having a reason to for a change.
Right. No, and part of why we do this, and we picked, there's multiple reasons why we picked Monday. One of them was that was the main day that Tim and I were mainly open. Tuesdays were kind of, and then Wednesday, Thursdays, Fridays, it was like no go. But the other reason is when we're doing something, a lot of times it's, hey, you can do this on the weekend. So that way it gives people the opportunity to listen in or watch and then prepare for the weekend so they can go and buy the stuff to be ready for the weekend. So,
I think that's so smart.
And I'm sure, right, as you will go through the list of what you have here for us tonight, Alex, that you're going to tell the listeners then what it is, so that they'll be able to go find it, right?
Yes, with your permission, I would like to do that at the end instead of the beginning. Yep. So for the listeners, we're actually doing a blind tasting today. And
I'm not blind. I can see it. I'm not blind. I can see it, dude.
There we go. I was a little fancy and got Glenn's for each one. But I'll be drinking alongside with you guys, and we'll go through it. This tasting is what's called Battle of the Grains, meaning that we have 4 whiskeys. Each one is actually the same proof and same distillery. The main difference being the main grain that is in the mash bill. I think Tim is now racking his brain trying to figure out which distillery we are drinking.
Leaning more towards probably Texas, Gladys.
I was going to ask if it was Texas, since you both are in Texas.
I will neither
confirm or
deny any accusations you may throw my way. But what I can confirm is that we have a rye whiskey here. We have an American single malt. We have a wheat whiskey, and then we have a bourbon, right? Bourbon being corn heavy or corn predominant mash bill.
And so that's so interesting that a lot of times we can see some difference in the colors. And today I did go with white in order to really pop out the colors.
But right up there, yeah. So he's numbered the bottles, guys. So we don't know what's in them.
I keep it up, Tim.
But that's what we've seen. That's all Alex has told us.
That's it. That's all you guys get. So on the color point of view, right, when you've got the same distillery, same climate, I'm going to go, I don't know exactly, none of these whiskeys have a carry an age statement, but I would assume that most of these are relatively similar in age. Okay. Right. So you're not going to see a big color difference. The reason I love doing this tasting specifically is that it allows you to pull apart the impact of grain on the final product, because pretty much everything else has been kept the same, right? Same country, same state, same proof, same distillery, same master distiller. All of that stuff is really cool and consistent, and that allows us to really pick apart the impact of grain on the final product.
Gladys is opening hers, so I can open and start smelling, right?
Yeah, start smelling if you want to pour. So what I actually love to do here is I like to pour half on the first run through and then do a very quick stop on the second run through to either confirm or maybe deconfirm thoughts you had on the first way through. A lot of times people will drink the first one and it drinks hotter than everything else because it's the first drink of the night. So on that second run through, you're able to pick apart the flavors a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have my little guys, so I
in order to get 4 glasses, it was a little tough around here, all right? Because we only get 2 in our house, so 2.
The reason that I have these little guys is that I did a tasting like 11 whiskeys. This was like 2020, 2021. And I'm like, I don't want to pour the whole thing. And I don't want, I wanted to be able to go back. You know, so I had all of them out. It was just like so much fun. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of hooked. So I'm like, I'm going to use them again. So.
Yeah, Tim, I'm actually going to suggest something on your end because you have 2 kind of curved glasses and 2 rocks glasses, right?
Yeah.
I would recommend not using the rocks and just once you pour half into the curved glass, drink it, pour half into the second curved glass, drink it, and then put the third one back in glass number 1.
Okay.
So reason being, here's a little bit of education for you guys. The reason that these are curved is basically to funnel the flavor vapors up to your sinuses and to your nasal cavity, right? And if you're drinking something from a curved glass like a Glencairn or a cognac tasting glass, and then you drink it from a rocks glass, the flavor is going to be a lot less intense. So in the interest of staying scientific, we want to try and keep as many variables the same as possible, including the glass shape, because it really does have an impact, I believe, on final flavor.
Okay.
Okay,
that's the way I'm going to do it. So,
all right, let's go ahead and drink the first one. And if you guys have flavors, just shout them out. I'm not going to tell you right, wrong until the end. And honestly, I think, you know, as you guys sip, I'll let the listeners know there's no such thing as a wrong tasting note. What I explain in the tastings when I do them is that tasting notes are often a sense linked to a memory. So when people taste a whiskey and they go, tastes like grandma's house, right? They're not crazy, but grandma just made snickerdoodle cookies and what they're tasting is cinnamon. Because the language part of our brain and the tasting part of our brain, they're not necessarily the best of friends, right? They don't live in the same neighborhood. So for a lot of people, it's quite difficult to pick out tasting notes, and they resort to, I like this whiskey or I don't like this whiskey. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But being able to pick apart tasting notes is really a game of having reference points.
Have you ever had anybody come on and say all whiskeys taste the same?
Yes, and I normally find that they've just had a very narrow range of whiskeys, because there's no way you can tell me that a buttery soft Irish whiskey and a heavily peated Japanese whiskey are the same. Yeah. It normally just means, well, I tried Jack Daniels and I tried Maker's Mark and I couldn't tell the difference. And it's like, well, you know, there's a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah, we call those the Bud Light drinkers.
And there's nothing wrong with it. Just don't go telling other people what to experience.
Yeah.
So do we have any tasting notes?
I have almost like a caramely.
I was going to say buttery in the smell, but I don't taste buttery in the taste.
Yeah. To me, it's quite soft, even though it's the first drink. It's not super spicy, not overly heated.
Yeah. I mean, I could taste like in the tongue, because I did the first sip to cleanse and then the second sip to like get it a little bit more. And
I do like I do like how it warms my tongue. I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how you said like cleansing the palate. I did a tasting at the Jack Daniels distillery when we visited Nashville, and they always described it as shocking the palate. Oh. Right, and taking a little bit of alcohol, letting it coat across the tongue, letting the taste buds kind of have that initial kind of like almost chemical reaction to alcohol, and then taking the second one and actually letting it, you know, kind of evaporate in the mouth a little bit and pulling out all the flavors.
Yeah, it has like a, I don't want to say citrus taste to it, but it has that almost like that cleansing kind of clean, like if I were to describe like a citrus drink, it has that nice cleanse, that night, you know, it's when I first tasted it, I mean, it was like that shock on the tongue, but then once I did the second one, I'm like, okay, it tastes like caramely, but once I got that third one to really get in my mouth, I'm like, it tastes somewhat citrusy in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah,
I was like,
I can totally see that.
All right, I'm guessing that's not the rye.
Again, can neither confirm or deny, but I would love you to write down your guesses, and then at the end we can kind of see just how spot on you are. And I will tell you this: this is not an easy flight to get. I've done this flight with a lot of whiskey drinkers, and even the people that really know their stuff, only about 30% of people correctly guess this. And I will say that women actually tend to guess better than guys. So
the pressure's on.
Exactly. Yeah, Tim gets a free pass due to inferior physiology.
All right. I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to mark it. Yeah.
Okay. It's not locked in, but it's
not locked in because I can change it.
Yeah, it's penciled in. So let's rock with number 2. And the one thing I would ask you guys to do is try and highlight differences between number 1 and number 2. Because obviously proof is the same, so any increase in heat or spiciness is purely down to grain. And while you guys sip and taste, it might be a good time for me just to talk to the listeners and maybe just describe some of the flavor profiles associated with each of these. Because I think most people have had a bourbon in their life, so generally speaking, it's a little bit, kind of warmer than something like a Scotch. Scotch tends to be aged longer, so it's a little bit more mellowed out. Rye is going to be a little bit more spicy, a little bit more floral. And then I'm a huge fan of wheat whiskey, actually, because I think wheat whiskey really softens out some of the rough edges of bourbon. But I love high proof wheat whiskeys, which carry all of the kind of qualities of wheat whiskey with just that additional viscosity and oiliness and kind of mouthfeel that I think goes a long way to making a rounded out, sipping experience. And then single malts, if you don't know what malt tastes like, I don't really know how to describe it to you. I feel like that's just one of those things where you have to experience it to be able to communicate what it is. But there is no smoke in any of this. So if you smell or taste smoke, either your house is on fire or you're having a stroke. Yeah.
This one, second number 2, had a little bit more spice to it.
Okay, cool.
A little bit more, a little bit sweeter too. Not like sweet, but sweeter than the last one.
Interesting. Did the mouthfeel feel any different, or did it feel kind of similar?
So this one had a smoother finish on it than the first one. And number 1, I could still feel a little bit of the here. This one, it started with the spice, but then it ended with that sweetness on on the back of the tongue. It's like kind of not back, but kind of middle of the tongue. It just kind of rolled over and it just kind of warmed my tongue up. And that's why I guess I felt it like sweet, because it was warm. So it was like a spice, but yet then this calm warmness, it was,
I think I have tasted this one before.
It's very possible. I'll tell you.
And I think I know, I'm not going to say it now, but I think I know whose it is.
Okay.
I'm going to send it to Gladys. But anyway.
Do it. Send it to Gladys, and honestly, send it to me. Let's leave the listeners in the dark. But
we have a private chat in here, so we can hit the private chat so everybody can see it.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll. Do I let you know if you nailed it? Because I will say.
I don't know if you want to or not, but just we can tell everybody later whether I was right or wrong.
Fair enough. I will say this is definitely one of the bigger distilleries out there. So the entire lineup, like most people who drink whiskey semi-regularly, would have heard of this whiskey.
Okay. So it's mainstream, you can go to the liquor store and pick it up.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Most people will have this available to them in, somewhere local, somewhere within their state for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for picking that, because it's always important, because when we're telling our listeners what to get, sometimes I'll send something to Tim because he can't get it in Texas. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, sorry, Texas, you can't get it, or you have to have it shipped. It's not something mainstream. It might be on the West Coast, or it might be in Oregon, Washington, but that's about it. And other times he sent me something that I can't get here. But we usually try to make it to where most people can get. It's always, depending if it's a controlled or non-controlled state, whether they've allowed it in that state or not. Yeah. So it's a multitude of different things that can cause them to not have access. So thank you for picking something that most people will have access. Sorry, Alaska, Hawaii, they're usually the last ones.
Yeah, they're usually. I can't say how many times we've had Alaska. We do get Canadians watching the podcast, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very cool. Well, happy to help, and you know, I'm will be excited to reveal the answers at the end. Are you guys on number 3 yet?
Got number 3 up here now.
Yeah, that was my cleanse to get onto number 3.
Very good. So Gladys is obviously eating crackers, and I think that's a important thing to touch on. I know you guys are going to talk more about food later on, but I think it's important to, especially when you're trying to get really scientific about it, is to kind of reset the palate in between each one, because there really is a carryover effect, right? Both food and previous drinks really do influence your experience next. It's why wine pairings and whiskey tastings are so popular, because food and beverages can go together and create a multiplicative, kind of experience, not just addition. But the reason that, like, I know we talked about this before the show, the reason, like, I was keen on, all right, if you're going to eat something during the scientific part of this, keep it basic, keep it crackers, keep it, water and crackers, blah, 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 just so that we can maintain as many of those variables as possible. And, not make a bourbon taste like a rye because you had something citrusy with it.
Right.
Or not making a Scotch taste like a bourbon because of something that you had beforehand.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating.
Tim did not like Guinness beer. Like,
oh no. Yeah. Before we taste, tell him about that. Before we ever had it on the podcast, I was not a Guinness beer fan.
So he's like, no. And then, but I didn't know he didn't care for a Guinness. And so I said, oh, we should pair this with Guinness. And he's all, fine. I mean, he made a face that I was like, and I didn't realize how much he disliked Guinness, but he went ahead, got the Guinness. Well, we had pot pie.
Oh, no, shepherd's pie.
Shepherd's pie. We had shepherd's pie. And he became a fan of Guinness because the way that it paired with the shepherd's pie was like, wow. He goes, this is the only way I will ever drink Guinness is with shepherd's pie. It made a huge difference in the flavors when you start pairing. And that's part of the fun of doing this is a lot of times we will taste something by itself. We will give our listeners what we think about it. And then we'll say, okay, now we're going to make a cocktail, or now we're going to pair it with the food. And it's so different. It's like, okay, what notes are you pulling out of this? Or sometimes it's what we had with it. It's like, oh yeah, no, that does not go well. So do not have it with that. It has happened.
Absolutely. No, I think that's so cool. And to be able, I think really there's an artistry that goes into pairing food and spirits. Like, I think there's a lot of knowledge and artistry that goes into just the food or the spirits, but being able to marry them together, I think, is such a cool skill to have. And the other thing I think makes a big difference too is the kind of sensory experience that goes with it. Like, Del Frisco is a very popular steakhouse, I think nationwide, but definitely in parts of Texas. But I imagine that eating Del Frisco steak in the parking lot on the bed of your truck is a very different experience than having it, with the mood lighting and, a nice bottle of wine next to it. I think it's so cool what you guys are doing and being able to kind of, match a full experience as opposed to just part of it.
Yeah. And it's become fun. And usually Gladys usually looks up the history on whatever we're doing. All right. And we found histories that I didn't know. But she's the historian of the show. All right. I'm the goofball of the show. So if somebody's going to make fun of what it is, I'm going to make fun of it. But she knows the history, and she usually brings up the history. And I think that's gotten to be an awful lot on our show notes, is pulling up the history that Gladys pulls up on whatever drink or whatever beverage we're using.
Or food. I mean,
food,
I was talking to somebody. I said, I looked into the history of meatloaf, and underrepresented food. And it was like, oh my goodness, they thought it was the funniest thing in the world. But sometimes when we know where this came from or how it started, I mean, that's kind of the fun part of it.
Absolutely.
It makes it more interesting. And we do enjoy that. And I know Tim does too, even though sometimes I go overboard because I geek out on stuff like that. That's my, I gotta educate people on this. And he's like, it's okay. Have fun with it.
Well, and that's part of, that's what's part of has made us a great podcast for 2.5 years, is the fact that there's things that Gladys does that goes well, and things that I do that makes the show work, and I think you're only like the third guest or fourth guest we've had, Gladys.
I feel honored.
Yeah.
third. Yeah.
Yeah, because we just a lot of people we've just trying to find a unique situation to get people in to what our show is. All right, and the first one we had was a sponsor for a while, which was Mary's Mixers, and we really love Mary's Mixers. We would take them back, but I think they've parted ways with their company. We just haven't heard from them. So,
Gotcha.
the other one we had was Craig Duswalt, who connected the two of us. All right, he was our marketing coach for both of us, and even though we knew each other, we never sat down and talked whiskeys until we were sitting in his house together.
Wow, that's really
and he's
cool.
like, "You two should connect. You're both into whiskeys and moonshine and stuff like that." And that's how the podcast started. Day 2 of that event, she had like her little brown bag of whiskeys for me to taste, and I had my little brown bag of moonshines and whiskeys for her to taste, and we go, we should do a podcast about this.
It takes a very special kind of person to not be weirded out by another person bringing a brown paper bag of whiskey samples and just handing it to you. And I think if you find someone who will be very excited to receive that gift, you should cherish their presence and probably start a podcast with them.
In that bag and that day, we actually tasted, if you've watched the TV show Moonshiners, we've actually tasted one of those gentlemen's in the woods on the show moonshine we had that day that we first talked about this show. I had some back then. I don't anymore. All right. Just
Was
there.
it good?
Yeah, it was good. It was a good moonshine. All right. There. And I used to be connected to their bootlegger in Nashville.
Very cool.
And I just not connected because he cut, you know what I mean? They cut to the pandemic, they cut people who they were dealing with.
Yeah.
And I was one of the cuts.
Yeah.
I'm in Texas. They're in Nashville.
It's a long trip.
Yeah.
Right. But it was just so much fun to, it's like, ooh, try this, ooh, try that. And we were both just really excited to share. And there was, and he knew that Tim knew that I wanted to do a podcast, but I was just, that's not my forte, but that's his.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that would be great if we could do this podcast. And so we talked about it, cut briefly during that day. And then a couple of weeks later, we did another connection, and it's like, and we talked about it further, and we're like, you know what, we got to move forward. And, we prepped for it. And I think it was like a month and a half later, we're like, let's do this. And we started the podcast, and it was in the middle of my crazy time of year for work. And I was like, but if we push it out, there will always be a reason why you don't start something. And so we're like, you know what, if we don't start it now, it's not going to start. So, it was, the perfect time to get it started. And 110 episodes later, here we are, with weight loss. So before we do, because I'm on number 4 now.
Yeah, I just took my first step at number 4. I'm curious if anything sticks out about number 4 or if it feels very similar to the rest of them.
No, I think I know what this one is. That's my thought is this one. Let me see if I can get it.
Just put something in the private chat.
Yeah, there we go. Is number 4. I think I know that number 4.
So now that you guys have done all
Tim, you and I are in the same. Did you hit enter right before I hit enter?
Uh-huh.
We're on the same.
Now that we've done 4, I would definitely recommend either going through them again in the same order or going back in reverse order. You guys can pick. I think I prefer personally like going through them in the same order again. But I know some people swear about doing reverse order, so you kind of reverse the order effects of whiskey. I don't know if it makes.
No, I want to go through the same order. All right, and I'm saving a little bit for later.
There you go. Sounds good.
Yeah, you always got to say.
Yeah. Good news is if you like something, you should be able to find it in your local liquor store.
That's what I'm waiting to find out. But yeah.
And I will be very curious to see if you guys change your mind. I mean, Tim's already kind of changed his mind on something in the private chat. I'll be curious to see if you guys change your guesses. Like, do you have your initial 1 through 4?
I have my initial 1 through 4 marked, and I actually, believe it or not, in my 1 through 4, On number 3, by the time we get to number 4, I change it.
Okay.
I changed 2 things. Yeah.
Very common.
So I have like column 2.
The other thing I was going to ask you guys, obviously we've got same proof, same distiller, same distillery, same state, so same climate, all of that good stuff. Does it feel like there's a wide bandwidth of difference, or does it feel like there's a relatively narrow bandwidth of difference when the only thing we change is the grain?
It's not a huge, it's very subtle.
Very subtle.
It's subtle, like, there's a nuance that there's a difference, and you're going, I think the last one that we tasted, that's where I felt a little bit more of the change.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I thought it is what it is, because of that little bit of more of a punch in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm like, I think that's why what I stated on the private chat. The other ones were a little bit more, slight difference. Here's a little citrus. This one's a little bit, a little bit sweeter, if you can call it sweeter. But it's not like it's sweet, because I don't do sweet. But it has that warmer vanilla, I guess, is what I was tasting.
Undertone of it.
Yeah. I think it was the vanilla that made it.
I get the vanilla in this. That's the second time.
Yeah.
Tell everybody again. What were the four brands?
So we have a rye whiskey, a wheat whiskey. So rye being typically spicier, more floral, more rye spice forward. Wheat whiskey is typically smoother, sweeter, sometimes nuttier or creamier. Mm-hmm. We've got bourbon, which is stereotypical bourbon flavors. So caramel, sometimes vanilla, oak, a little bit of, kind of just spice behind bourbon. And then single malt, American single malt, which is kind of like a Scotch if you made Scotch in America.
Yeah.
Which I got into whiskeys because of single malt Scotch.
Mm-hmm.
And once I got into single malt Scotch, then I got into the brown liquors.
Yep.
I'm still all right. When we talk about the brown liquors now, our first podcast was vodkas. All right. And she made me fall in love with a vodka that I'm still, as much as I can up here on my shelf, still trying to savor it. I think I have a little bit left. I think I have this much left in the bottle that she sent me from up there in Oregon. Is one of my favorites.
My question about vodkas, because I'm not a big vodka drinker. I was in college, but that's probably not the most nuanced drinking experience I've ever been through. Because vodka is made to be a flavorless, odorless spirit. So is it just the refinement that differentiates good vodka from bad vodka, or is there true flavor differences?
It's very clean. So what I sent him is a local Oregon vodka. And they started with their gin, then moved into vodka, and they've now since done other things. But it's very clean. And I didn't even send him the reserve. I sent him the normal one. The reserve is hard to get because it's a little bit thicker. When you look at it, you can see that it's not just watery. It's got substance to it. It's been filtered like 3 more times, but there is just this clean taste to it, because most vodkas, even though it tastes good, like Tito's, for example, I love Tito's. I absolutely love Tito's, but I can still feel a little bit of the bite. Not much. It's there. It's subtle, and that's why I like it, because it's pretty clean. But with this other vodka, it's just nice and clean and smooth. And the reserve, it's almost like drinking water. It is just super duper, just nice.
Yeah, for me it was. I never really could tell you the difference between vodkas until we did a tasting of several different. All right, and I think we did 3 on that first night. It was our very first show. We did 3 different vodkas, and I think we had like 26 foods. All right, we overdid it the first show, and then we learned we got to. I think it was like week 3. We're like, we got to calm down. This is going to be an expensive podcast if we don't. Because I calculated 3 bottles of liquor every week.
Yeah.
So 6 different menu items. We're like, this is going to cost us a fortune.
So we need to pare down. Yeah. And I sent him a bottle of bourbon from Oregon, which of course he couldn't get either. And
that's
it's
gone, by the way. That's gone.
Might send you another bottle. But that's just kind of the fun part of it is I love being able to bring forth what Oregon has to offer if I can. But there's so many great alcohols out there, liquors and whiskeys, of course. Whenever we can bring a whiskey, a bourbon, I don't think we've done.
We wanted to be. The difference is we love whiskeys, and that's true. That's the foundation how we met. But we're like, there's a million whiskey podcasts.
Yes, there are
There's
many.
Not a lot of other drinking podcasts is why we wanted to do this, and I really love the concept we come up with was food and drink, not just drink. You know what I mean? And I realized, like I said, there's a million whiskey podcasts, and every place I go, yeah, I got a whiskey podcast. I'm like,
you and 10 other guys.
I don't want to be another whiskey podcast. Just like we were connected through Craig, who's the coaching world and the speaking world. There's a million coaching podcasts out there. And that's how I looked at a whiskey podcast. And I'm like, we got to be different. We got to be so different that we're so unique and that nobody copies us.
Yeah.
And we were just happened to be lucky that LikeTheWayYouDrink.com was available.
Well, it was funny because we used to be Lady G and Mr. T was what we were
originally episodes,
yeah. And then at one point where, I kept saying, well, you got to like the way you, or I like the way you drink. And so then we kept saying, well, you got to like the way you drink. And then one of the episodes after we were done and we're, unwinding, having the conversation. And I said, hey, is it even available? So Tim looked up and he goes, it is. And he purchased the domain. He's all, well, we got to grab it while we can because it may be gone. So that's how, and then we switched it to like the way you drink, because we're always talking about what we do. It's not about just drinking a drink. For us, it's drinking to enjoy what we're drinking and enjoy pairing it with food. And if you don't like it, then don't drink it. And so that's how we came up with that. Now, before you tell us what all these are and what we think, please tell us whiskey weight loss. People are going to go.
Yeah, we want to know what let's take this moment right now to tell the listeners what whiskey weight loss is.
Absolutely happy to. So obviously we've been doing plenty of whiskey drinking so far on the podcast. And that's probably the biggest thing that differentiates the whiskey weight loss method from keto and paleo and all of the other, many different weight loss strategies you can find in the world. If you go to pretty much any weight loss site that has strategies and everything, it's all based around restriction. Right? It's this idea of, well, don't do this and you'll lose weight, and stop drinking this and you'll lose weight. And by the way, don't be happy for the next 6 months and you'll lose weight. And I just think that's so ass backwards because when you remove happiness to lose weight, you get temporary results, right? Because eventually you're going to do the thing that makes you happy. And food and drink is designed to bring joy to our lives to a certain extent. Now, can you drink a fifth of whiskey and eat a pizza every night and expect to lose weight? Probably not. But what you can do is 90% of the time we can optimize for weight loss and for fueling your body and making sure you're in good health. And then 10% of the time we can have fun with what we do and how we eat and how we drink. And that's really the principle that whiskey weight loss is guided upon. This idea that it's not about what you can't have, it's about optimizing to make sure you can eat and drink the fun stuff, like whiskey. And is it that whiskey makes it easier to lose weight? Probably not. The joke I tell at networking events that I attend is, well, you can't overeat if you're blackout drunk. And it's not wrong, but drinking is not going to help your weight loss. But drinking does make life a little bit more fun, especially when you're with friends that have an appreciation for good beverages and for pairing good food with good drink and making it a true experience. Like, I'm not one for just pouring a tall glass on a Tuesday night for no reason, right? To me, that's a waste of calories. But pour 4 half ounces on a Monday night to appear on a podcast and drink with friends, that to me is a good reason.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I'm with you at a lot of those networking functions, and I notice usually at those networking functions, I'm the one drinking whiskey and you're the one drinking coffee.
Well, that's because we attend networking events at 9:30 in the morning, Tim, and I still have to work the rest of the day.
I do too, but I work better with whiskey.
Well, you're behind a screen, man. I don't know what to tell you. But
no, that was a thing between Craig when Craig actually connected the two of us and said Tim's into whiskeys. During the pandemic, because we were always like doing Zoom calls.
Yes.
And I'd be on a Zoom call at 9 a.m. sipping whiskey. And I was like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I'd sip it all day long.
I have this cute cup the little teacup that says whiskey teacup. So it's this beautiful cup. My sister-in-law gave that to me. And, it's like essentially there could be whiskey in here. I did do that one time, but it was not for breakfast. But it's just fun. And I'm a runner, and I did see this T-shirt that I need to buy. It says, I run because I love tacos, but I need one that says, I run because I love whiskey, so
Yes.
You got to have a reason why you're doing what you're doing. And, after I ran a half marathon, if I have a beer, guess what? I'm not going to feel guilty that I had the beer. I just ran in 2 hours, 13.1 miles.
Mm-hmm.
I deserve this beer. And it's my brother says that's why I do crazy Spartan races and half marathons so that I can drink before noon, so I have an excuse to drink before
that's why
noon.
I network is I can drink before noon.
Exactly. Tim, you're an adult. You can just drink at 9 a.m. for no reason. Would I recommend it? Probably not. But
No. I have to complete the networking meeting. All right. And the girl down there, the girl bartender at Walk-Ons.
yes.
All right. She knows me very well. I walk out and like even today, the dive bar, which is our Monday meeting, I walked out and the guy goes, "What do you want?" I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "I'll get your whiskey for you."
There you go. Very good.
Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to check out your program, because you're not just telling people to have whiskey, what do you do to help people actually lose weight?
That's a great question. So, a lot of people will assume that they need to go to a dietitian or go to a personal trainer or something to fix one element of the weight loss process. And whiskey weight loss really stems from my time in the fitness industry and seeing how incomplete a lot of these services are. To lose weight, you really need three things. You need some kind of nutrition strategy, some kind of plan. You need some kind of exercise or workout structure that works around you as opposed to the other way around. And then you need some kind of support system, accountability to keep you on track and to be that person that either gives you a pat on the back or a kick up the butt, sometimes both. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's what we did. That's what I did when I created Whiskey Weight Loss. I worked backwards from the solution. I was like, what do people need to be able to lose weight? They need nutrition, they need exercise, they need structure and accountability. And when I created Whiskey Weight Loss, it was, okay, our nutrition strategy is going to incorporate the fact that sometimes we're going to want to have a drink or two or 3 or 7. Right. Our exercise plan is going to work around what people want. So if they are working out at home, we create that. If we are working out at a gym, I can program that. If it's a apartment gym, if it's an HOA neighborhood gym, we take all of that into account when we structure the program. And then that accountability and coaching kind of comes throughout. It's a 12-week process. So we meet throughout the 12 weeks to make sure that you are kind of hitting your checkpoints and hitting your markers to make sure you end up where you want to. And all of that comes with, kind of a whiskey branding, so to speak. So, some of the time we'll talk about, what we're eating, meal prep, meal strategies, blah, 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 all that good weight loss stuff. And sometimes we'll just chat about what we're drinking that evening. It allows people to have the flexibility to enjoy the stuff they want to enjoy, while also getting, obviously, all the benefits that come with weight loss and improving health and all of that good stuff. Because everyone has their own reason that they want to lose weight. Some of it is aesthetics, some of it's confidence, some of it's health, some of it is they want to travel the world because they just retired, all of that good stuff. So if someone wants to find out more about it, because I don't want to talk about it anymore, I would much rather talk about whiskey, you can find my website at whiskeyweightloss.com, or you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/whiskeyweightloss.
Perfect.
We'll put that up, trust me, because we do promote you for being on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for this. Okay, so we're going to move on to determine what we came up with and what we're actually drinking.
Sounds good. First of all, I want to know your favorites, if you have that marked down.
Oh, that number 4 was good, but I think number 3, these were really good. Number 2, I love the spice, but I love the way that it finished. So that's what I liked about number 2, the kick, but then the smoothness. And I love when there's a brown liquor that gives that smoothness after it says, "Here I am, but hey, I'm kind of cool." So that's what I got out of number 2. Number 3 was an easy to drink. It was just super easy. Number 4 was I think I know what you are, and I do love that. So I think number 2 and number 4, I have to say, were my favorite.
Okay, that's awesome. Tim, what do you have?
So number 3 was my favorite. All right, I like that the best.
I was going with that one, but then it was between 3 and 4, and I had to go with 4 over 3.
The smoothness of number 1, I really, really liked. All right. The spice seemed to be in number 4. All right. And in number 2. Number 2 now is probably my second favorite, though, because I like a little bit of spice, but not a lot. I still am banking on what number 4 is. I still think I'm right on number 4. But number 3 is my favorite, and I'm sticking with that.
Okay, very good. So I'll start by revealing this. It's actually a Kentucky distillery.
Woo!
Not Texas, like Tim guessed in the private chat. So it's Kentucky. It's one of the biggest distilleries in terms of volume in the world. It's actually Woodford Reserve. So they do a bourbon, a wheat, a rye, and an American single malt, which is one of the reasons I use it for this tasting. It's really hard to find a brand that does all of those at the same proof. In terms of the lineup, so number 1 was actually the wheat whiskey.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go number 3 next. So number 3 was the bourbon. So typically,
yes, got that one right.
Group the bourbon and the wheat because the profiles are relatively similar.
Mm-hmm.
And then they note that rye and single malt are the most distinctly different.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know you guys felt very strongly about this. Number 2 was the rye, and number 4 was single malt.
Okay.
So, listeners, if you can tell by the size of disappointment, both Tim and Gladys were really, really confident that number 4 was the rye.
Yes.
And I think it's quite interesting because Scotch does have a different whiskey making process. Scotland does, and really, like what most people are exposed to are Scottish single malts. Mm-hmm. And so an American single malt and a Scottish single malt, there are differences in flavor profile. And when you keep everything on the same continent, in the same state, in the same distillery, the differences between rye and single malt are actually not that pronounced as you would expect. Okay. Especially because single malts are typically lower proof. Rye is often, you'll find high proof rye, I think, a lot more readily available than super high proof Scotch.
I was wondering, because I know I love single malt Scotch, and I almost went with number 2 as the single malt, but then I moved it to number 1 because it was a little bit, that little bit of a kick, because I usually don't drink wheat. Mm-hmm. So that's why I put that one as wheat. And then because of that kick, number 4, that's why I put that one as the rye, but I can now see why it was that, but I did get number 3, the bourbon. It was very smooth, and that's why I thought that was the bourbon. And
that makes sense that's what I love, because I love bourbon. So
yeah. Well, Tim, you like what you thought you liked, which is a nice little confirmation there.
Yeah.
And of course, for me, I love rye and I love single malt, which was 2 and 4.
Yep. So you nailed your favorite. So you know what you like. You just didn't quite get exactly what it was. But like I said earlier, like not many people bat 1,000 on this. It is a really hard tasting. And when you remove all of the context of both the bottle and the label and knowing what it is, and then removing all those other variables, it's pretty tough to nail each one. Like I think everyone here knew that like the whiskeys were different. Right, like 2 and 4 tasted very different from 1 and 3, and 1 and 3 were slightly different from each other, and 2 and 4 were slightly different from each other. But without context clues, it's really hard to be able to identify which one is which. So for all of your listeners out there who want to kind of recreate this, Woodford Reserve is the distillery. You can buy all of these bottles for $30 to $35 for the most part. I know at least in Texas, Specs carries all of them. And
I was looking there to see if I had a Woodford Reserve on my shelf. I probably do on the outside bar in the living room, but I have a Woodford.
I know I have a
probably a bourbon. I know
Probably a bourbon, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have it here, but I have it at home. I have a Woodford at home. Oh my goodness, that
So
is.
you want to wait a minute? You want to tell everybody what my picks, what I thought they were?
So Tim thought number 4 was the rye, number 3 was the wheat, and number 1 was the single malt. So you kind of grouped that 2 and 2 correct, and just flip-flopped them each time.
But my branding, wait a minute. Name the first brand, because a lot of people don't know that first brand is pretty well known for being a Texas-only brand.
Right.
The second one is more known, but the first one is a very well-known Texas brand, is Garrison Brothers. I could have swore it was Garrison Brothers.
And sometimes it's hard to tell. It really is. I do another tasting, which is bourbon across America, and that's a fun one to do, like Kentucky or like North America. I do Kentucky, I do Texas, I'll do Tennessee, and then I'll do Canadian. And it's fun to try and pull apart the differences that location has on whiskey. But yeah, I think the overall message here is blind tasting is hard. And
no. Blind tastings are fun.
Oh, unbelievably fun. I agree. But don't go into it being cocky and expect not.
Oh no, I never wanted to be. I wanted to be surprised, and I was.
No, I love it. Two things. One, we definitely have to do something else with the Insiders Club, and have a small group. That I think would be very fun. The other thing is, so I had my little steak bites and then my shrimp. And so I took a bite of my steak and went with the single malt, and it was absolutely delicious. So the meat with the single malt, all the flavors just came through, and I went, oh, this is so good. And then I did the shrimp with the wheat, and that also went very well together. I did add some lime to that one, and it went very well. So there's those combinations of the citrus with certain ones, and that richness of the steak with the single malt. That's just on point. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Fantastic. And also, if anyone wants to recreate this at home, I'd probably recommend slicing up a steak and going through the whiskeys one by one, and then going through the whiskeys with a bite of steak on each one, and exploring not only the differences in whiskeys, without any additional like variables, so to speak, but then having that extra flavor component, and see how well each one marries with that food.
So, which is what we're going to do in our next part here, is we're just going to go through and talk about it with food. So you can stay with us if you want, but we've got food for prepped.
I'll leave you guys to it so that you can go through it without my extra thoughts, because I don't have any food in front of me, unfortunately. But I want to thank you guys for having me on, and thank you for making me a part of all of this.
Yep, we want to make sure that's the way that we spell your website right for people.
You nailed it.
Okay. So go check out AlexWhiskeyWeightLoss.com. All right. I will see you again on Friday. I think Friday is the next time I see you, but
I believe so.
Thank you so much for coming into our podcast. We're going to have to do a different one. We're going to do this again. Different one.
We'll do it again for sure.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Was that not cool, or was that not cool?
That was a lot of fun. I was like, there was some, the funny thing is that I picked the ones that I liked, even though I thought it's not what I originally would like. Like number 4, I went because I thought it was a rye, because I really liked the taste of it. I went with number 2, even though I thought it was a wheat. It wound up being the rye. And then number 4 was a single malt, which are 2 things that I absolutely love. But number 3, I really liked it because it was so smooth. But I picked that one spot on, that it was the bourbon. And I love bourbons, but I definitely love ryes and single malts a little bit better. But number 3, to have that, just that smoothness of it was just spot on. So having the shrimp with the wheat went very well. And of course the steak is like, oh my goodness, this is from a molcajete. This was leftovers from yesterday's dinner, Mexican restaurant. And the single malt went just burst of flavor, absolute burst of flavor. So I'm going to try it with the bourbon.
So originally I had picked the rye is number 3. Number 3 was the rye. And then I changed my mind and I went, whoa. When I tasted number 4, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. All right. And then I went, wait a minute, 3's got to be the wheat. It's just too smooth.
And I went with bourbon for that one because it was so smooth.
Oh.
And I don't know that I've had the wheat before. That was like so yummy. I really enjoyed that.
You know what we never did? Remember when in 2022, Gwen and I went to that Boot Hill Distillery in Dodge City, Kansas, and I never sent you the wheat whiskey.
Mm.
That wheat whiskey was fabulous. But the only place you can get it is in Kansas. So I was like, I got to make a trip to Kansas to get it. Well, it's not available in the store.
You drank my wheat whiskey. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I did. And I enjoyed every moment of it.
Very cool.
Ooh. So the number 3 was the bourbon, and I've tried it with both steak and shrimp. And it matches both of them.
I've had the steak with all of them. Steak just goes very well.
Steak goes with whiskey, period. All right? It's just...
And I didn't want to put any cocktail sauce on the shrimp. I went very basic.
Okay.
I did do citrus on the one because I wanted to taste it with the wheat. But my shrimp, I just... I put marinade. It was a salt mix that had a salt and pepper and a few other spices in there. Threw that in the water when it boiled, and then I threw in my shrimp so that way the shrimp would absorb the flavor. So I kept the shrimp very simple. I did not do any cocktail sauce. That way I can get the true flavor of the whiskeys with the shrimp.
Mm-hmm. So number 2, which was the rye. Shrimp, okay. I'm going to take a steak bite real quick. Unfortunately, Gwen picked a rougher steak for me, a tougher steak. She got a flank steak instead of a prime. And I really would have rather had a prime for doing steak bites. But anyway.
Well, when I do flank, I usually marinate it in beer and orange slices. The shrimp goes better with the wheat and the rye than the bourbon.
I'll agree with you on the shrimp. The steak, all right with the rye. Of course, now all I have left is number 1, which is the wheat, and number 4, which is the single. So I got to say, the biggest shocker out of all of them for me was that number 4 was the single malt.
I thought that was
That's
right.
a big shock. Mm-hmm. Right? I would never pick that out as a single malt.
Mm-hmm. But like you said, number 2 and number 4, there was that spice to it.
Mm-hmm.
But number 4 had a little bit more of a kick, and that's why I picked it as rye, but it was really the single malt. So to me, to my taste buds, I could taste the flavor. It was that kick that said to me rye, but it was actually saying single malt, only I wasn't thinking single malt.
Mm. All right, so I'm going to take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to say, wouldn't it be great if you could do a private tasting with Alex like this? Mm-hmm. All right. These are connections that we are now making 2 years into our podcast that we're able to do and do private tastings, private things with people. Go to likethewayyoudrink.com, and you must be 21 to join. Join our Insiders Club because of the fact that it's exactly things like this that we want to bring our insiders in to be able to do a private tasting and share those notes to come out on our podcast, right? Those are things that we want to share with you, our listeners, in private. All right. And I really like that, but it's free. Yeah, it's free to join. But the reason we have to have you join is because we have to verify you're 21 years of age. So, likethewayyoudrink.com, click the button, join the Insider Club. You will get invited to a tasting very similar to what we just did with Alex.
Only you will actually get the samples. Imagine that.
Yes, you will actually get the samples. We can't send samples to you if you're not 21. Okay, which one did I just pour? Number one.
So what I was doing is that I had my little glass and my number right in front of it. That way I didn't mix it up. It's the fun stuff. I mean, you could drink it out of here, but that's no fun. You got to put it into.
No, I put it in the glass to aerate it. So.
But the steak goes with all of them. Truly, steak and brown liquors go very well together.
They always have. They always will.
Yep. Thank you for joining us today. Now, we come to you every week because Tim and I, we're your primary sponsors. Today, it was weight loss.
Whiskey weight loss.
Whiskey weight loss. Thank you very much. Whiskey weight loss with Alex. So he sponsored us today. So thank you very much, Alex. We appreciate you. A lot of great information, a lot of fun. We love doing things like this. And sometimes we do it on the back end. And then we bring you the things that we enjoy. But we might need to do a little bit more of this more often. This is kind of fun, not knowing what we're getting. But we have our primary sponsors. That's Tim and me, that we're the ones that are taking care of the bills. We keep the lights on, if you will, through our businesses. So we're going to give you our weekly who we are and what we do. We will start with me because that's what Tim usually lets me do. I am Gladys Boutwell, Insurance by Design, helping employers become employer of choice because small businesses have a hard time competing against big employers. And the way they can do that is by showing their employees how much they care through employee benefits, because there are 101 creative ways that you can show your employees that you care. You can go to insurancedesignpros.com to check out my website and some of the benefits that I provide. But if you want to get on my calendar, go to enrollnoworegon.com and we can start the conversation. And I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Tim.
Hey, thank you very much, Gladys. All right. It's been great being part of this podcast for the past few years. I'm trying to find actually a business card here somewhere that I don't want to show too much, but I want to show you guys an example of what we do. When someone goes to a networking function and they actually meet somebody and the website says, and their card says, this is my website. And I'm going to use Gladys's website, all right, as an example, insurancedesignpros.com. But then their card says, hey, contact me. I'm going to use Ashley Kavanaugh's card because she's a good friend of mine. All right. She's another web designer like me. But hers doesn't do that because Ashley's smart. But anyway, you go to their, you see their card and it says their website. And then right below it, it says their email address. And it says whatever the name of their business is at gmail.com. Those are my ideal referrals. You know why? They don't look professional when they hand out that card. I want to put it together a professional branding, if you want, package, because I can help you get your email professionalized, all right, as well as your website done for a very affordable rate. Go to simplyzwebsites.com, book an appointment with us because you cannot build a website with us unless you book an appointment and have a conversation with us. We are not the people who just like, yeah, click here and buy. No, we're somebody who actually wants to talk with you, what your vision is, and get you the results you want. Now, we're not everybody's cup of tea. We are a template website builder, which means that we're not custom. We don't do custom coding. We don't do custom fancy things, all right? We actually use things that are templated that can click in with WordPress to make your website work. Why? Because the most small businesses, small entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, all right, they can't afford the $30,000 customized website. So we want to build something that gets them affordably going and making money. If you want to find out more, go to simplyzwebsites.com, book an appointment with us, and we'll talk about your strategy to be online. Our actual model is online success in 3 clicks or less.
I love it.
Yeah. Other than that, man, shout out again to Alex Shaw, Whiskey Weight Loss. Appreciate you so much for coming on the podcast today. Oh my God. I only have number 4 which is the single malt left. I've finished everything. You?
I did too. Actually, I have this much left.
Here we go. This is what we got left to do. Our cheers tonight.
That's why I left it for our end of show cheers.
End of show cheers. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, next week we'll have another exciting episode for you. All right. You want to find out what it is? Come show up and find out what we do. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, hey, we want to say thank you to the people. Looks like, gosh, what's his name? Robert. When you use this profile, Robert, I forget who you are. Robert, we appreciate you coming in every week and saying hi to us. We appreciate you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week. Tim and Gladys out. Cheers.
Cheers, y'all.